Hello friends of the TESOL Benevento local group. I would like to present today's speaker, Mr. Sabs, who will show us 9 fun and powerful ways of bringing personalized, interactive creativity into your classroom and beyond. First of all, I would like to say something about Sabs. Sabs has many qualities. First of all, he lives in Paris, France, and this already something. Seriously speaking, I will add that Sabs is a multi-talented human being. He is a creativity coach, as well as an abstract artist, Paris photo chronicler and poet. He runs online master classes on creativity, photography and writing, and is developing Paris retreats on the same topics for when we can travel more freely again. His current language teaching project is to get his Fun English Lessons website going again, which is full of free creative teaching resources, as well as converting his Rainbow English School Association into an innovative online course provider. If you want to learn more about Sabs, you can follow one of his Facebook page. Today's the day. And now I leave the floor to Sabs.
This is the first time I've actually done a Zoom presentation with PowerPoint, so I really am crossing my fingers and my toes. And actually, what Maria Antonietta said is she took about half my presentation, I think, when she was introducing me. Okay, let's see. So the idea of this, I created this especially for you, because I haven't been in the English teaching field for a while now. I've been doing other things, and it's pretty exciting to come back to this. So I thought I would share 9 creative ideas for personalized language learning, and here they are. So I'd like to thank Maria Antonietta. She never tells me if I should call her Maria or Maria Antonietta. So
both of them.
But I've got a new name for you, so we'll see what happens. So yeah, this opportunity to share my ideas, it's fantastic. I can't wait. Thank you, dear viewers in Italy. Hello, Italy. I'm excited to be talking to Italy from France for taking the time to be here. So here's a little bit of background. I'm really aware that we don't have that much time, and I've got so much I could tell you. I could almost spend an hour on every single slide. So I'm going to try and go fast. And well, I'll show you how it works. So back in the 1990s, I created a thing called the Tefl Farm. It was a website that one of the first fun websites for English teachers. And it was an interesting place. Each contributor to this website had a farmy name. So we had I was the farmer, and we had a scarecrow and a sheep, and someone called Muddy, and someone called Pitchfork, and get ready, Maria. We had a witch, and the witch was called Witch Hazel. And can you guess who Witch Hazel was? Well, it was your very own Maria Antonietta, who looks after TESOL Italy. So Witch Hazel, I've known Maria for a long, long time. Not to say we're old, but for quite a while. And so here's today's program. The expected duration is about an hour. I hope that's okay with you. I'll start with a disclaimer. I'll say who I am, introduce the topic very quickly, and I'm going to give you 3 creative ideas, and then I'll open it for questions. Otherwise, you'll forget what your questions are. 3 more creative ideas, more time for questions, 3 more creative ideas, more time for questions, and an invitation. I'm not going to sell you anything. It's free. I just like you to be part of my English teaching universe. So let's go. I can see Maria and one other person. So if any problems happen, Maria, you signal me. Otherwise, because I don't really know. Okay. Just seeing my screen is a little bit hidden with the. Okay. So this is a humble disclaimer. So here's my disclaimer, people. And that is that you are the world experts on your students, on your kids. And I never forget that. So everything I will share with you, you put it into your context. And if you don't think it will work, then you're right. You know, you are the ones who know your people best. So I always remember that. All I'm going to do is share some things that I've done with my students, and you decide if they're interesting or not. Nothing that I say will be very revolutionary or new. It's all stuff that, you know, you'll have read in other places. But what I'm hoping is that it might remind you or stimulate you to try some things that you haven't done for a while. As I say here, you're members of TESOL Italy and you're friends of Witch Hazel, so you must be proactive, caring, humanistic teachers. I'm sure you are. So you probably do a few of these things already. So I'm just hoping that I will encourage you to continue to be as student-centered as possible in your own teaching context. And I know that some contexts I think I say this on the next slide, actually, in the introduction. I know that some contexts are easier than others to do weird and wonderful things, but I know that a lot of teachers are doing amazing things in their English classes, extremely creative, inventive. So you know what you can do in your classes. I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit about myself. This is some of the things that Maria actually said already, but I'm gonna do it. You know, it is what it is, just so that you know who I am, because you probably don't. So this is kind of the stuff I've been up to in English for the last few years. I trained with Tony Buzan on mind mapping. I've worked for various Paris language schools. I'm going to go fast here because I want to get onto the tips. I've been a trainer for Pilgrims, which is a well-known English teacher training school. I was the director of a teacher training center near Paris for teaching teachers to do the equivalent of the CELTA, which is a teacher training certificate. Worked for the British Council in Paris for quite a few years. I've actually got something hidden here. I can't see it. Pedagogical director for a Paris school. I wrote a book for Cambridge called Primary Music Box, using music to teach English. Worked for the British Institute in Paris, which is like the London University. Set up an English school in France called Rainbow English School. Worked with Disney on an animated English project where I was their voice, and I wrote 9 songs and stuff like that. This is French. Praticien en psychopédagogie positive. I can't really see you, or I'd ask you if you understand what I said. It's basically positive psychopedagogy. It's the equivalent of positive psychology, but for teaching. So it's positive education, basically. So it's pretty cool. I was with TESOL France for a few years, and I took over their newsletter and revamped it, made it rather pretty. I did the CELTA and the Delta teacher training things through Cambridge. Set up a language school in Greece. I've had various teaching websites, and I was a trainer for Cambridge Examiner, Young Learner Tests, the main suite, first certificate, and I wasn't an examiner for IELTS, but I was an official trainer. So that's my English stuff, loads of English stuff. And I just wanted to tell you, I'm also a human being that does other things. And as someone who tries to be as creative as possible, a big part of that is incorporating my non-English stuff into my English stuff. And I'll show you what I mean in a little while. So basically, I've lived in France for half my life, so about 20 years. No, that's a joke. And I paint abstract stuff. I do masterclasses and retreats in Paris on creativity, photography, and writing. I publish a piece of writing every day in English, which you can read if you like. I do coaching. I publish a photograph, which I also use in my English teaching every day as well. I write poetry. I've got a grown-up daughter and a preteen son, so probably some of you know exactly what that means. And I do love music, but I don't torture people with my music. I prefer to let other people do that. Although I do have a musical drum that I bong sometimes. And my motto, if I have one, could be helping people be as creative as they would love to be. So I think we're ready to get on to the actual teaching tips. Is everything okay still, Maria? Yeah, it's all right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm just a bit nervous because I can't actually see too much of what's going on apart from my screen. So here's the introduction. It'll be very short. I've got 3 keywords: that my lessons be varied, personalized, and fun. And that's basically it. That's what I try to do. The traditional classroom. I don't know how much you've looked into multiple intelligences, NLP, how the brain works. In other words, how humans like to learn best. But the traditional language classroom, I don't mean our language classrooms, I mean the traditional language classroom from about 100 years ago. If you look at all the ways in which the brain, the human, loves to learn, learns best through scientific studies, and you look at the traditional language classroom, basically it does everything the opposite, everything wrong. In those days, they made students sit down, shut up. They were punished physically if they, tried to express themselves. It was inside, hours on end, not enough breaks, not much interaction with each other, no fun, not really any surprise, nothing that would sort of, the brain loves surprise, the brain loves new things. So the question is, are our language classes today still like they were 100 years ago? And I don't think they are, but in some education systems, I don't know about Italy, I know a little bit about France and a bit about Britain. In some cases, they're not as interactive and brain friendly as they could be. So I'm very much someone who tries to make the classroom, which is what we have, it's the situation we have, to try and bring as many brain friendly approaches and activities into the classroom as possible. And of course, we're in the education system, the students have exams that they need to pass eventually, so we don't forget that. But the thing is, if we can make our lessons more fun and interactive and introduce surprises and things, they should actually learn better, much better than with traditional methods. So that's my kind of point of view on that. And we do our best, basically. We do our best, and I know so many fantastic English lessons that, despite not always a perfect situation, we still manage to have great lessons. As soon as the doors close, we're in our little kingdom, and we can do what we want. So I think you should. So here are my ideas, numbers 1 to 3, and then we'll have questions. So the first one is BBC News. Now, I don't know to what extent you can use external activities, but I'm going to assume that you can to an extent. This is something I discovered many years ago, and I'm talking about 1-minute news. There's this thing, I don't know why, I can't find it on BBC News website, but on YouTube, you go to News Central, I've written it, and you have this thing, I think it's every day, it's 1 minute, and it's 1 minute of news stories. And there are normally about 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 3, but there's normally about 4 stories in 1 minute, and it's incredibly rich in English. And you can do so many different things. You can have them listen to it. And I'm not quite sure how many things I've said here. I'm just going to show all of these. Yeah, so you can have them listening without seeing the video and trying to understand. You could have them literally listen and try to write it down as a dictation or a gap fill, so that they're not trying to write every word, but there are gaps. They could watch without the sound. Watch without the sound and try to guess what the stories are about. Or they can listen without the video and guess what the video shows. They can also do very simple things like literally listen without watching and say how many stories there are. So I'm a big fan of starting very, very simply and then getting more complicated. So for example, the first task might be listen to this 1 minute news thing and tell me how many different news stories there are. And then the next thing might be, okay, we're going to listen again, with or without the video. It's up to you to decide. This time, I want you to write down the number of countries you hear, for example, because very often there are 4 stories in 4 different countries. and they're always giving the names of countries. You can get more and more complicated. For example, you might ask them to write down all the verbs that they hear in the 1 minute, and there's normally quite a few. You might ask them to identify the tenses and write down the tenses. This is fantastic for the present perfect. I don't know about Italy, but in France, the present perfect tense is French students' worst nightmare. So this activity is fantastic because there's normally about 4 occurrences of the present perfect. And you can even get really inventive. You can do things like you have some students turn their back to the video and others watch. And the ones who are watching then try to describe what they saw to the other students. So it's very, very rich. I'm going to move on. Yeah, I just said that. Okay, so this is a kind of a bonus one because I went to a website, the actual website called bbc.com/minute. It sounds like it's the same thing, but it isn't. It's actually 1 minute videos on a single topic. And it's made to be really, really fun to watch. So there are some longer ones as well, but many of them are 1 minute. Can you imagine how rich that is in content for your students? They will never get bored. It's a really interesting video with visuals that change all the time. The topics are extremely varied and they're really good for young people. You know, it's not boring news stories about politics. It's really good, up-to-date things which are relevant to an average person. They're clearly subtitled in English. I'm not sure if you can take the subtitles off, so you might have to cover the subtitles with a piece of paper or something like that. And yeah, dynamic visuals, really, really great, and they're fantastic discussion starters. So I've got a couple of activities in a minute about discussions. Well, how do you get them discussing something with interest? It's not always easy. Show them a 1 minute video, and the videos are very often on, you know, up-to-date topics like, I don't know, should we wear masks in public? Or, well, you need to go to the site to have a look, but really good discussion starters. And the actual bit where it says what number idea this is covered up for me. So I think it's idea number 2, spontaneous 1 minute speaking. This is a big favorite of mine. It's a great starter for a lesson, great warm up. And what I do is, there's no judging of their English and there's no correction during this activity. They've just come into the language classroom, you're warming them up. The last thing they want is to be told about all their mistakes. This is very much part of positive psychology and positive pedagogy. So this is just to get them speaking English, get English words in their mouth as soon as possible, and in their mouth and out of their mouth with success. So you can have a sort of language bank of interesting stories, of interesting topics. It could be anything. It could be your favorite singer, or, you know, your town, or your favorite hobby. Or it can be chosen by the students. The students could think of a topic that they want someone to talk about, and they have to talk about it for a minute. And there can be a question from the student afterwards, but it's supposed to be short, snappy, literally no correction whatsoever. Applause at the end. I'm really a really big fan of, you know, in language teaching, I don't know about you in your teaching situation, you can tell me in a minute, but for me, there's always this dilemma. Do we go for them speaking perfectly with no mistakes? Is that the number one priority? Or do we want them to be speaking confidently without hesitating, even if they make mistakes? And I don't know if you can guess what I prioritize, but I prioritize fluent speaking first, confidence in speaking. Because it's a much nicer teaching environment as well, because whenever someone speaks, if you stop them every mistake they make, they never get anything out. And it's extremely frustrating and demoralizing. So I let them get stuff out, I congratulate them, and then later on, we have to teach them. So later on, their mistakes will be covered one way or another. But for me, I want them to feel good about speaking first, and then we'll make them speak even better. As opposed to thinking in some places, you know, as soon as they open their mouths, bam, mistake, oh, it's not very good. So let them speak for a minute at the beginning of the class, applaud them, and they will feel great about it. And my last one before we have a break is about music. I am a huge music fan, and basically everyone likes music, don't they? So here are some of the reasons I like music. I notice with my students, they could have the most horrible accent you can imagine, but sometimes I would catch them singing an English song when they were doing something else, and their pronunciation was absolutely perfect when they were singing the song. Then I'd ask them what song they're listening to, and they'd tell me with their not so good accent. So there's something about music, the pure pleasure of singing. They don't question how to say the words, they literally just repeat. So I'm a big fan of using music. And I'm also a big fan of getting students to do as much work as possible. So why not invite them as part of your lesson to get a favorite song which has a good amount of English in, not just sort of yeah or something, and prepare a lesson on that song, which they then give to the rest of the class. They can run it by you first if you like, but it's incredibly motivating if they share something they love in a context which will make them proud, such as they prepare a lesson using the vocabulary from their song. It could be a gap fill, get them to print out the lyrics, get rid of all the verbs, mix the verbs up, give the sheet to their classmates, and they listen and do a gap fill. It can be as simple as they like. It's about putting the power of learning into the students' hands, and that is really, really motivating, I find. This is a picture of the book that I wrote for Cambridge called Primary Music Box. There were 36 traditional English songs, and I had to think of 36 ways of exploiting them. And Cambridge are pretty, it's not a walk in the park. It's pretty heavy stuff. I mean, good, heavy stuff. And songs, there's something special about songs. It's not always English that they can immediately use, but they will learn idiomatic expressions. It's really good for getting good fluent pronunciation, running words, one word into the next naturally. It's not in France, they often speak word by word like this. There's no liaison between the words. And also the French language is quite staccato, it's da 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 da, whereas English is more dum da 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 dum dum dum. So I was going to say it's like a foreign language to them. So those are my first three. And I would love to know if anyone has any questions about that. And over to you guys.
Can I say something?
I'm just going to stop sharing.
Okay, can I say something? No, I was just surprised by your suggestion of the BBC 1 Minute World News. Just because I have been regularly using it for a lot of time, especially regularly with one of my classes. And I saw that they were quite good at picking up and just grabbing a few words and then also expanding, especially when the topic and the headline could tie in with their personal experience. So thank you. I appreciate also your suggestion of extra activities, because I just, honestly speaking, I just let them watch the news and then write down whatever they could catch, whatever they could understand. So thank you for suggesting some extra ways of exploiting also these resources. And then also thank you for the other resource that I didn't know anything about, that is the bbc.com/minute. So thank you for that. I didn't know anything.
Why were you surprised that I mentioned
it?
Why?
Why I was surprised? Just because you suggested the fact that it contains some short videos. That could be a further way. I do love videos, because I think that students should also be exposed to funny but also short videos. I'm not a fan of watching films in English when they might feel frustrated because they can't catch words. So I'm just in favor of short videos that could also just be a soft approach to learning the language. So
what is your name? Ellie?
Elena.
Elena. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of young people these days, they seem to have a very short attention span. Like Facebook scrolling, videos, even adverts, it's just bam, 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 changing all the time. So we have to fight this. So if you imagine the video is only 1 minute, and within the 1 minute, there are 4 different sections. It's ideal to keep their attention. So yeah, I'm glad you like that. And I recommend everyone else at least has a look at it and imagines how they could try using it in their lessons. And it's fresh. There's a new one every day, you know, great. And if you do use it regularly, they get used to the format, but the language will change. The verbs will change, but maybe not the verb tenses. For example, there's always seems to be the present perfect at least 2 or 3 times. So, you know, if that's one of the things that they have real trouble with, take a minute a day. Tell them, do it at home. Take a minute a day, and you will have several examples of correct use of the present perfect in your head, in your ears, which is one of the best ways of learning. You know, maybe even better than actually learning explicitly, is just to hear it used correctly again and again with video. So it's in context. Great. So thanks for that. What else?
Hello.
Hello. Hello, Marina.
Hello. What I think is extremely important in what you have presented so far is the fact that students are given something that is some topic to talk about that is relevant to themselves. Something, because very often in many schools, speaking is only talking about what they have learned from books. And probably they find the topic boring. They are completely uninterested. So I think that to make them speak, it's important to give them something relevant to their lives. And but someone might say, well, but we have to teach literature or culture. Yes, true. But it's important that even literature literature must be taught to the students in a way that after learning about different things, they speak about what they think about it, what they want, which connections they can make with the contemporary world. So it's not just the repeating, the paragraphs of the book, but having a personal approach. And I have noticed that when they speak about something that matters to them, or when they wanted to give their own opinion about, whatever is being discussed during classes, they find the language they need. They look for new vocabulary because they really want to convey their opinion, their point of views. So, and also I have noticed that when a student, for example, gives the presentation, they all listen. The rest of the class listen carefully, because it's not just listening to someone who was born or someone who wrote this and that. They want to know what the student thinks about what they have been studying. And I remember, for different reasons.
Marina, how old are your students in general?
They were, because I retired 2 years ago. They were for 14 to 19.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're young people with a lot to say. They're learning a lot. They want to express themselves. And if they're in a language class which gives them the confidence and the freedom to do that, it's wonderful. And not just to comment on what you said about literature, maybe for the exams they have to learn about literature. Is that going to be useful in their future lives or not? I don't know. But if they expose themselves to normal, natural, up-to-date English, that isn't going to hurt their literature. It's going to make it You know, if they didn't study the literature and just watched YouTube, maybe they will fail the literature exam. But if they consolidate the literature that they need to read with real language, which is using the same structures as the literature, they will only get better and better. Yeah, that's great.
But the literature, to me, in my opinion, literature is absolutely a great form of content, because in literature there is life, there are thoughts, there are feelings. So, but when they, you know, respond to what they have studied, there is so much interest, there is so much insight also into the students themselves. So the focus is always on the student. And
absolutely, yeah. I really like, yeah. I mean, I agree with you because
so they express
agree with you because you agree with me. So is there?
I remember one activity. Then I remember one activity that for the younger ones, no? And it is something very popular in Britain. Show and tell, for example, and it is something that I really would recommend, particularly for the newcomers, you know, because first of all, you learn so much about the students. Because they, you know, they bring something that matters.
Marina, I'm just a little bit nervous about the time.
Oh, sorry.
Because I've got 6 more points and maybe...
I will be listening carefully.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I say something very, very short? What you said, Seb, what you said reminded me of what you said many years ago about present perfect, that you were very thankful to present perfect because actually it helped you to earn your salary.
I have a job forever.
90% of your teaching was about the present perfect, which is something that exists only in English. And I found your ideas very inspiring, really. And in particular, I found it very intriguing, the idea of making students teach grammar to their peers. Which is
well, I say a little bit more about that in a minute. Yeah. Well,
it seems very challenging.
Yeah, I think in a future activity, I think I mentioned that. I mean, one of the problems, I won't go into this, it's a long topic. Like I said, we could discuss any of these topics at all for an hour easily. But in France, the problem is they have the same structure as the English present perfect. They have the same structure. It just doesn't mean the same thing, you know. So I won't go into details, otherwise we'll never get.
Okay, now I mute myself.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next 3. So share my screen again. Yeah, honestly, folks, you know, get me talking about English and you'll be praying for me to stop what I'm trying to do here. Okay, here we go. So number 4 to number 6. Yeah, I'd love, I can move it. Okay, number 4. All right, so pyramid discussions. Literally, I just thought, what am I going to talk about? And the first fun activities that came to me, I chose. I don't know if you know about pyramid discussions, but they're pretty cool. You present a topic with several possible solutions. So this could be something like, you know, a classic one, like pollution in the town. And there are maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 possible solutions. You even see this in exams sometimes, in the speaking exam. And students have to discuss which would be the best solution. Well, try it this way. You present the topic with several possible solutions. It could even be student suggested. And then students individually, on their own, quietly, they look at let's say the 9 possibilities and they choose their top 3. And then they pair up with a person next to them. And they discuss, because they've both got top 3s. Maybe they probably won't have the same. So they have to then discuss together, in English, of course, what would their combined top 3 be? They don't have a choice. They have to, in a time frame, they have to reduce all that they had together into one new top three. And then the next thing is you put those pairs with another pair who have also got a new top three. So there's two more top threes. They discuss together, and then they find a new top three. So they're reducing down and down. But each time they discuss, they have to argue for why they think this is better than this. It's not that they have to win, because part of it is compromising, because you can't have every choice that you would like, because you have to compromise, just like in any sort of adult situation, really. And every time they are expressing themselves and expressing their opinion, they're getting better at it and more confident. And they start off on their own. So they're thinking about it on their own, first of all. So they've got something to say when they meet their pair, the other pair. They express themselves vocally, orally, aloud to their pair. So they're expressing what they thought to themselves in their head aloud. Then when they get to the new pair, they're even more confident about their arguments. So you have to prime them before with the correct language for, giving their opinion, agreeing, disagreeing, suggesting, all this sort of stuff. And then hopefully you, as a teacher, are wandering around discreetly, listening to them, maybe noting down some of the things they say if you want some things to look at later, maybe not. And then it gets to the point where there are only two groups left. You've put them together, there's two groups left, and then you can have a whole class discussion. You can even divide them. You can have half the class on one side, half the class on the other, facing each other. You might need a spokesman so it doesn't turn into chaos. And you need to give them a clear objective. They need to understand it's not just a shouting match. There has to be, the objective is to agree on three things which they will go forward with. So and they can vote. Yeah, it doesn't have to be sort of students can get pretty passionate about this sort of thing, which is great, as long as they're getting passionate in English. But if it's too passionate, it can be a bit unmanageable. So you can give them a time to express themselves, and then they vote. It doesn't have to be a big fight. So that's one I really like, this pyramid discussion. And the good thing about it as well is, if you just put them together in big groups and said, right, class, what do you think? The person who's most confident or that has the biggest mouth will give their opinion, and the others won't. And you've lost a huge amount of giving each student. I try to give each student the possibility to think about things before someone else, I'm sure you know what I mean. If you ask the class a question, someone will put their hand up, they will answer. Well, what did the other, 20 or 30 students do? Did they think about it? Did they wait until someone else put their hand up? We don't know, but it's not promoting deep language reflection and practice. So that's why I like these activities. The next one, notes for students. This kind of goes over that. So when students are performing, these are my notes to myself, really, why I do this. When students are performing, let them perform. What I mean by that is, if they are daring to speak in front of the class, that's fantastic. That they are using English is great. It's a success. I don't interrupt them as a rule. I don't interrupt them. I don't correct them when they are expressing themselves in English. And I go further. I acknowledge that they have expressed themselves, and I applaud them. And sometimes I ask everyone else to applaud, and I praise them. I'm not praising them for their English here, because maybe it was crap. Maybe it was good, maybe it was crap. I'm not applauding their English level. I'm applauding their bravery. I'm applauding the fact that they dared to use language, because in some cases it's like it's for exams. Why are you learning English? Well, because I have to pass my exam. That's a really sad reason for learning a foreign language. I mean, maybe it's practical, it's good, you could maybe get a job, but language is for communicating. So I applaud when they try to communicate. And we never know what it costs them to express themselves, to speak in front of a group, especially teenagers, especially in front of their peers. All that they're going through, they're embarrassed, they don't want to lose face. So when they do, when they're brave enough to do that, I always try to recognize it. And for adults as well, for everybody, but especially teenagers. And but they also need to learn. You know, they need to learn the correct forms. They need to pass their exams in the end. So we still have to do our job as official language teachers, where the main way of judging their results will be their exam results, unfortunately. Because, you know, language, I would consider language, you might consider language a success, a foreign language, if you get a date with someone, you know, or are able to put your opinion in a discussion. But in our context, it's passing exams. So what I often do when students are expressing themselves is I sit there quietly and I write down the most common mistakes. I might take 2 or 3 for each student, depends how many you have in the class, and I put them on a piece of paper, but not in order. They're all mixed up. So I might do student 1, I'll put it in the middle of the page. Student 2, I'll put it at their mistake at the bottom. Student 3 at the top. I might get 2 mistakes for each student. I focus on the most common ones, common mistakes, and the ones which are most important. In other words, the ones which are most likely to lose them points in a test or an exam. And then, they're anonymous. The mistakes are anonymous. You know, I don't put their name next to them. And then I will give them the piece of paper with all the mistakes to the class. It's an exercise, but it's not an exercise from a book. It's not an exercise that I got from the internet. It's their mistakes, but nobody knows whose mistakes they are. But the funny thing is, when they're going through them in pairs, not the whole class, because then only one person who knows the answer will say it and the others will switch off. They do it together on their own, maybe. They try and correct the sentences. Try and make the sentences have only one mistake as well. Keep it simple, one mistake. If they did 2 mistakes, correct one of the mistakes and only have one. And then, one by one, a couple of minutes on their own to try and find them, then with their pair, then maybe in 4s. And the funny thing is, I noticed that far from being embarrassed about their mistakes, they're quite excited when they spot their own mistake. That was my mistake, that was mine. And they're kind of proud, you know. So the fact that they've enjoyed spotting their mistake, and they will actually tell the others, hey, that was mine, that was, and they laugh. And that's pretty good, because it means they now do not associate making mistakes with failure. And they're excited about learning. If they say that was my mistake, that means they are totally open to correcting that mistake, and they will remember it with pleasure, and they will associate making mistakes with opportunities to learn and grow. So that's a massive objective for me. So those are my notes for students, and now I'm on to number 5. Mind maps for education. I'm pretty into mind maps, and they're really great for note taking and for memorizing. You can use them in many different ways. I'm sure many of you use them or have seen them. So I'm just reminding you that it is good, it's cool, and they are based, if you do them properly, they are based on really a set of really strong principles on how the brain likes to learn. For example, long black and white lists, maybe we're used to them. One of the things that happens is we get used to them. So we reject other methods because we know what we're used to. We know what we like. Why change it if it isn't broken? But the problem is it could be so much better. So some people, they might not want to try a new system because they're comfortable with what they know. If that's the case, then they should stick with it. You know, don't force people to do what they don't want to do. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't try. So with mind maps, I studied with Tony Buzan, who was the guy who kind of invented them, and in their modern form anyway. And the idea is to make them highly personalized. There's some very strong principles that you should use, which I won't go into now. But you master the basic principles. The students, it should be personalized, highly personalized. It's their creation. Once they've got the basics, they should play within the basics. So it still follows the rules for how the brain likes learning. Then they should personalize it. They should personalize it so much that every mind map is unique. And they should look at it regularly. And when they do that, it starts to get imprinted on their brains, so that when they're in the exam, they can close their eyes or not. Often their eyes will go up into the air and they're thinking, and they can see their mind map. They know what every single branch, what color it was, what the keywords were, what the keywords stimulate, even if they're not in the mind map. So it's a really good, fun way of learning powerfully. And they should, for any given topic, especially in language learning, it's ideal for language learning. Let them build up a big library of really good mind maps. And you know, mind maps, one of the great things about it is when a new topic comes or a new word comes, you just add a new branch to the appropriate thing. You don't have to try and slot it into a big long list. And because it has an artistic element, they're actually proud of the actual mind map. I don't know how many students are proud of their notes, but they can be proud enough of a mind map to show it to others. So I'll just finish on that topic because I could go on for a long time. This is me using a mind map in Rainbow English School. As you can see, it's a pretty basic one, but there it is with the words supplied by the students. I said red and they gave me red things. That's me congratulating Tony Buzan on passing his mind mapping certificate with me. No, it was the other way around. I've done quite a lot of mind maps. I had a big mind map site actually. This was one for the English tenses. It was one of my first ever mind maps. It's pretty mega. It tried to put all of the English tenses in the active form on a single A4 sheet with the simple, the continuous, present perfect, present continuous, past, present, future, keywords, when you would use them. Try to put everything in there. And it's it's now used all over the world actually. So feel free, if you want it, I can give you a copy. And this is my son. Here's an example of personalizing a mind map. So my son, he was 6 or 7 when we did this. I went around the house with him. We were learning colors. He lives in France, so his first language is French, and he speaks Spanish and English as well. Went around the house looking for red things. He found red things. He said, I want this to be one of my things. So he took the red thing. We took a photograph of it. You see he's in some of the photographs. And for each word, I decided, okay, I'm going to get 2 vocabulary items. One is just the name. He was very young. One is the name of the thing that he found. And the other is a word that goes with it. Could be an adjective, could be a verb. Basically, adjectives and verbs were appropriate for him at that time. And, you know, he was the one that chose it. So he was proud of it. He was on there. His picture is there. He chose the words. And in the end, you know, at that age, it doesn't really matter what words they're learning, as long as they're learning words. You know, they're sponges. They can absorb as many as they like. So he was, the thing is, especially at a young age, for them to associate learning English, I say English, it could be anything, with pleasure, not with a horrible task that they groan when they have to do it. If you can get them to enjoy it, then the sky's the limit. That's why fun is not so frivolous. Making it fun is not actually not taking things seriously. It's actually giving them a powerful reason for going ahead, because they think learning languages is fun. So they will actually do it as opposed to not do it or avoid it. So, here's a simple one that I did for his school day. You know, very simple. You couldn't get much simpler. There's only one branch. And on that branch, I put the verb and the time. So he could practice the time, he could practice the verbs. There's a visual thing to go with it, which is very important. If you don't have any images on your mind maps, they're not really proper mind maps. Or they're much, much weaker in their effect. You know, the visual thing is, images are far stronger than words, really. Words are just trying to represent images in many cases. So they actually get in the way of the image. And creative idea number 6, group poetry and story writing. So poetry is amazing. It develops rhyme, rhythm, imagination, especially if they're trying to understand what a poet said, or they're even better, they're writing their own, and the confidence to express their feelings. Because you imagine, especially young kids, expressing their feelings, it's not always that easy. So they have to feel confident but they won't be mocked, laughed at, which is the role of the teacher, really, to set the standards of the class. You know, this is a class where we appreciate every effort. And then for them to expose themselves emotionally, which they may do in a poem, you know, that's them exposing themselves again. So we have to give them every possibility to do it without feeling vulnerable. Give them a theme. Get them to suggest themes. And some examples. It's okay giving them, you know, I don't know, Wordsworth or Shakespeare or Yeats or something. But what about if you wrote a poem and you didn't say who it was by, and you said, we're going to study a poem today. It could be a really simple one. And then at the end you say, who do you think wrote that? And they might not know, but they might guess that it's you. And the thing is that if it's you, it will mean more to them than if it was some unknown dead famous poet. Of course, you can study the famous poets, but when there's a bit of you as the teacher in your lesson, all of a sudden something has changed in the lesson. They're getting to know you a little bit more. And I don't know what your approach is. It's quite personal. It's a personal approach. I mean, some people, they don't want to expose any of their personal feelings at all as a teacher. Others, they're quite happy to say that they do. But from experience, I know that my students like it. If I want them to describe a painting, I hold up a painting of mine, even abstract, just a bunch of colors. You know, hey, it's Mr. Will's painting. And that kind of excites them. And they will probably see things in it that I never did. And they're right. Group story writing is great. This is the last one before the next little question thing. Sorry if I'm going on too long. So this is just one activity that I like. You write a sentence. Each person writes a sentence on a piece of paper at the top. Once upon a time, there was a something called something. And then they fold it over and they pass it to the next person. The next person writes, one day she or he met a called Turn it over, so it's hidden. Give it to the next person. They both loved something or other. Give it to the next person. So they decided to buy a something. We don't know what. Fold it over, turn it to the next person. I'm sure you know this activity, but it's such fun. And go and live somewhere for the rest of their lives. The end. It's very simple. But then the last person who writes the last bit then opens the whole thing up and reads it. And it's normally absolutely hilarious. And fun means they're enjoying learning English. Are they learning much English? Well, a little bit, maybe new vocabulary. But it's associating fun with English. And, you know, crazy things. I remember one, it was something like, once upon a time, there was a mouse called Mickey. One day, he met a president called Donald. They both loved bananas. So they decided to buy a swimming pool and go and live on the moon for the rest of their lives. The end. Absolute nonsense. But why is there so much laughter at the end of this activity? It's because they know it's nonsense. And if they know it's nonsense and they find it funny, that means they're laughing at something funny in English. That means they're getting English. They know what is normal and what isn't normal. And this is great. So if your students laugh at an English joke or a subtle English pun, this is great news. And I think it says the end, and it is the end. So I'll open it up for questions again on any of those. Anyone who hasn't spoken already? Do any of you do these activities? Do you have variations on them?
Be brave, please.
Sorry, any questions at all?
Okay.
No questions. People are stunned. They just can't believe what they've just heard. It's incredible.
I don't want to be the one who speaks all the time. But
maybe they want to go and have their dinner or something.
Just to say that these activities are really interesting.
Can I have one person who hasn't asked a question or made a comment before I go on? There you go. It's a challenge for you. I don't accept people that don't, you know. you can ask yeah, go ahead. Go
can
ahead.
I ask a question? Do you make any difference between concept minds and mind map? Concept mind and mind map.
Concept maps and mind maps.
Yeah. Do you make any differences between these two types of maps?
I don't think they're the same thing, are they?
No, I think that for instance, maybe a concept mind is a sort of map that is built up with a sort of tree. There is the main ideas and sort of trees, but I'm not if I'm wrong or not.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting to make my students build my mind map, and I also build some sort of library. But instead of a library, I try to make with them a sort of ebook with a sort of mind map on different authors of English literature, and there was a challenge because they tried to build up maps in a synthetic and analytic way. I mean, for instance, take into account Wordsworth. They tried to analyze, first of all, his works and the main ideas of his poetry. And the second mind map that we called just like synthetic mind map, only referring with photos and pictures. And the challenge was that to describe British students, other students' mind maps, taking into account only photos. And this was really interesting.
Well, it's great if you're using those because it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, mind maps, the original ones from Tony Buzan, they're very good. If you have one that you like and it works and it gets your students to be more enthusiastic about, anything, then use it. The best one is the one that you like using and that they like using.
Yeah. Yes.
That doesn't mean that you shouldn't look for.
It's also very interesting to make mind map in a collaborative and cooperative way. I mean, with group works, not only individually, because they can analyze some parts of the authors or some topics according to their interests, and they can exchange ideas in this ways.
Right.
Okay.
And one thing with mind maps is what you can do is I wouldn't go more than 3 levels of branches, for example, on a single mind map. You've got your main branches, a sub branch, and then a sub branch. I would stop there. Otherwise, it gets too much. If you want more sub branches, you should take one of the main branches and make that the center of a new mind map. And get the students regularly to hide the outer branches and just look at the central image, so they know exactly what the mind map's about. They look at the main branches and they hide the rest, and they try to remember the next sub branches, what they are, and all the facts that are attached to them. Because the idea is that you don't have every single word on the mind map that you're trying to remember. It's not just, sometimes you see these things, it's basically people have taken a text, they've copied the text and they put it in a box on the end of a branch. This is not a mind map.
No, I do agree with you. Yes. So
you need to study mind maps to realize the power of them. One of the greatest things about them is keywords. One word to stimulate a whole load of more stuff.
Yeah.
So that's great that you're using that.
Okay. And also as regards the errors, I take into consideration some of your ideas, because I always make them speak in a fluent way, especially when you have to have conversations. So the focus is more on fluency rather than accuracy. And we discuss the errors later. And the same way you suggested, in an anonymous way. So they are not stopped when they are speaking, and it works, especially not only for grammar but also for pronunciation. And but there are a lot of ideas that you suggest. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I mean the students don't mind learning. They're there to learn. They know that, but they're often quite sensitive about being put on the spot. So it's finding, and they need to be accurate. To be good speakers and to pass exams. So we can't get rid of the accuracy and they just speak, but it's awful. So we have to find clever ways to do it. Human ways, to be honest. No one likes to be told they're wrong. That's not nice. So that's great. Okay.
I like the idea, Sab, of you emphasize fun in learning. And I don't know, is there a physiological, I know that one produces more endorphins when we're happy. Is there a physiological, as you've got the psychology background as well, is there physiological proof that our learning capacity is much better when we're relaxed and having fun than when we're actually tensely trying to learn something?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm absolutely not an expert, but I'll show you a picture of a book in a minute, which basically highlights the main ways in which humans are made to learn. It's not that we like to learn, we're made to learn. We're not made to learn in classrooms, for example. You know, that's a pretty well-established fact. We are absolutely not made to learn in classrooms. We're made to learn, if you imagine something like a kid on a boat with their father, let's say fishing boat. They go out to sea. Instead of going to school, they go to sea. And so they're on the boat. They're learning the skill of fishing. They're learning physical strength from pulling up the lines and from moving the boxes around. They're learning about different types of fish, how they should deal with each one, where to find them. They're learning about tides and weather and winds. They're learning social skills because they're communicating with their father or with the other people on the boat. They're learning patience. They're learning.
It's a good argument for home education, actually.
Well, yeah, I mean, but that's how we're supposed to learn. You know, they're doing it with a massive purpose. The purpose is to feed the family. If the little kid goes home and he caught a fish and they eat the fish that evening, what an incredibly good feeling they must have from their day's work. And they're learning without learning. There's not a single lesson being had. It's not, you know, right, we're going to sit down now and we're going to learn, I was going to say learn knots. No, you might sit down and learn knots, but it would probably be done, you know. Anyway, the point is, I don't think we're made to learn in classrooms. That's what we've got.
Absolutely right.
And is fun part of it? Well, you know, ask yourself, you know, ask ourselves. Do we, I mean, fun is one of the biggest drivers for actually wanting to do anything, isn't it?
Exactly.
Really?
My philosophy entirely, yes.
Yeah. So I think classrooms are pretty artificial, you know. If you read Ken Robinson or someone, the thing is, I think it's getting better and better, but many classrooms haven't moved on that much from, you know, the industrial age. True. When we were basically churning out people who weren't going to rock the boat, as it were, and fit into pretty standard jobs, you know.
And sit in serried ranks for a whole hour when you're full of energy at the best time of your life.
Yeah, kids don't want to sit down for hours. So They want to be out running around. It doesn't mean they're. I mean, my son is, you know, the expression "on the moon." I don't know if they use it in English actually, because I've only got that experience in France. Sur la lune? Yeah, sur la lune. You know, on the moon. Like the kid looks out of the window and starts daydreaming. Is this because they're not interested in the lesson? Well, possibly, but it's not out of disrespect. It's that they're frustrated. They're a human being and they don't want to learn. I don't know. You know, you can go down a route here. Many students will enjoy the classroom experience, but the more fun it is, I think the more they'll enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And learn much better.
Yeah. I'm not here to criticize the entire education system, but we have to work within it, just like we have to work within the laws of the country. But anyway, all right, I'll move on to the next three, the last three. Yeah, and then it'll be time to go and. Oh my God, we're going over the time I expected. I'm sorry about that, but I'll go through the next ones as quickly as I can. Share my screen again. Okay, here we go. Where am I? Yeah, number 7. Okay, number 7. And number 7 is, I've forgotten myself. Flipped classroom. Have you ever heard of this? It was quite trendy a few years ago, the flipped classroom. As I understand it, I don't do it officially, but as I understand it, we get the students to study a topic before the lesson. Very often in lessons, the teacher is telling the kids stuff that they kind of could have read themselves. Why does the teacher do that? Well, maybe because the kids wouldn't read it on their own. But what about one of the riches of having a teacher is the teacher can respond in real time to real questions about things the students really don't understand. So it's a bit of a shame to spend a huge amount of the time in the classroom basically telling them stuff they could have read in a book. Whereas the real beauty of a teacher is that they can help the students understand what they don't understand instead of just shoving facts into their heads. So I'm kind of a fan of this. I do it from time to time. I get them. It could even be a grammar lesson. Why don't you just give them the grammar lesson? They are supposed to read it. Will the thing is, will they? Well, maybe you can find ways of incentivizing them. Maybe you can get them together with another classmate, a comrade, and they're supposed to look at what they studied together before they come to the class. So it's not just them on their own. They've got a bit of accountability. They have to meet up with another kid and just discuss a question that you give them. They get into the class and then don't give them the answers. Get them to compare the results in small groups or in pairs in the class. So you're still doing nothing. It's pretty cool. And then, well, you're managing the class. Then the pairs or the groups can then teach the thing. So you haven't done anything yet. You've given them the thing to learn. You've got them to compare what they understood in class. Then you get a pair of them, for example. No need to put one student up in the spotlight. Get them as a group. Safety in numbers, and get them to give the lesson what they've understood. It only need be 5 minutes, because don't forget, we want the majority of the class to be the teacher as the powerful resource for what they didn't understand, or to give them more practice, which they don't get from a book. So they can teach for 5 minutes. The students can ask questions of their comrades who have just given the little lesson. And the teacher's just watching, absorbing, seeing who's getting it, who isn't. And then finally, the teacher takes back control. In other words, puts the teacher hat on again, sorts out any difficulties, and now you're an expert on their difficulties because you've seen them trying to explain it to each other and asking questions. Gives them some further practice. And here's a great thing. I really like this. It's one of my favorite activities. I will say things with mistakes. And their job is to spot the mistakes. And this can be a riot. With little kids, it's amazing. I can get if we're doing clothes, I can get a kid up and I can say, so, Jack is wearing a red pullover and pink trousers. And they will scream, no, he's not wearing pink trousers, he's wearing blue trousers. And they absolutely love it. And these facts that you make mistakes on, official mistakes, can be as, high level or low level as you like. One thing with this, if the students spot a mistake in what you're doing, in what you've said, what do? Do they put their hand up, they say the mistake, and then you carry on? Well, if they do that, one person has interacted and all the rest have done nothing. So I think it's better that there could be one or two like that because it's really fun. They could all shout out when they hear a mistake. But in general, get them to note down the mistakes. For example, you might make a mistake, the wrong word, use the wrong word. Not too much or they won't be able to write it down. So use a few wrong words. They write them down. Then they compare with the person next to them what the mistakes they spotted were. You can make it 10 mistakes in the text that you read. And then it's, how many they spotted out of 10. And then when they come back to you to tell the mistakes, they've all thought about it on their own. So one person with the biggest, most confidence hasn't dominated and all the rest have switched off. So I love that. I love this intentional mistake making from the teacher. It's a fun activity because they like it. They like it when the teacher makes mistakes. Shows we're human. And number 8, now this is very close to my heart because I publish a photograph of Paris every day along with the text. You can read it. Did I say that before? So images, how powerful are images? Again, I'm going to quote my BBC site because they have this page, which is the week in photos. There it is, bbc.com/news/in_pictures. Fantastic photographs from the news from that week. Every week there's a new set of photographs. They are so powerful. I was going to show some here, but it would take up too much time. So many things you can do with photographs. Describing photographs is directly from the Cambridge exams. It's in the oral. And so many students, I show them a photograph, a really interesting one, and ask them to talk about it. And it's like, there is a man. Well, you know, they're not going to pass a Cambridge exam by saying there is a man, and they're supposed to talk about a photograph for 2 or 3 minutes. So help them to know what to say. Descriptive. What descriptive language do they need to describe a photograph? What can they say about a photograph? Tell them. So they can say what they can see. They can literally describe what they can see in the photograph. They can say when they think it is. So predictive phrases. They don't know, so they need language for predicting. They need modals. You know, it could be in Italy. It could be spring. Why? No, not just it could be. Why? Because I can see little leaves on the trees. It might be very cold. Why? Because they're wearing coats. I think it's indoors. Why? Because I can see lights. So, you know, where is it? Why are the people, if there are people, why are the people doing what they're doing in the photograph? Who are they? You know, all sorts of things. What are they wearing? What are they doing? This, you know, depending on the language you want to practice, ask the appropriate questions. You want to practice the present continuous, ask what they're doing. And you can get as simple, like describe, I can see a cat, I can see a dog, to as sophisticated as you want. What do you think the people are feeling? What do you think the man is feeling in this photograph? You know, if he's, and believe you me, the BBC News site has all sorts of photographs covering all sorts of situations and emotions. It's wonderful. And then make it personal back to them. Would they, the student, would the student like to be the man in the photograph? How would they feel if they were in the photograph? Would you like to be playing that sport? Why not? What sport would you prefer to be playing? Why? So rich, so much from a single photograph. But students often struggle because they don't know what to talk about. And, you know, as I said, it's direct from Cambridge exams and maybe from your exams as well, describing photographs. And yeah, so that's my photographs thing. Oh yeah, I should say the personal thing. I'm a photographer. Guess whose photographs I use? Well, not from magazines. I use my photographs as well as the BBC photographs. And can we take it a step further? Guess whose photographs you could also use? The students' photographs. They bring in photographs. Okay, they could have clipped them from a magazine, but how much better if they took the photograph? Can you imagine how much more interesting the students, how much more interested the students will be if they give their photograph to their classmates who then describe it? Not only are the students read me. Redmi needs to be muted there. How much more interesting if the students are discussing a photograph of one of their friends and the person whose photograph it is isn't sitting there waiting for the break. They're listening to what the people are saying about their photograph and their family or, you know, their dog. Yeah. So that's really, really great. Redmi, what's going on? And the last one. This for me is I call it the gold standard of language, fun language exercises. I don't know if you know, you probably know this. Believe me, it works from tiny little kids to retired people. I've had them all running up and down the classroom doing this. Why is this so great? Well, I don't know if you know this, but basically you've got a text and it sits on a table at one end of the classroom. The students are in groups of 3. Maybe do something about them. If they're not taking part, then maybe get rid of them. Yeah, so put the students into groups of 3. One's at the other end of the class, the text is at the other end of the class. One student runs to the end of the class with the text and tries to remember as much as they can. They come back and they dictate, so they have to read. Then they have to remember. They come back, they dictate the text to their 2 teammates. Both teammates have to write, not one. No one is ever doing nothing. They dictate it to their 2 teammates, but all the other groups are doing it as well. So they whisper. So they have to speak very well so that the others listen and write down. So there's reading, there's writing, there's listening, there's speaking. And then once they get to the end of a paragraph, the person who was running sits down and another of the teammates is the runner back and forth. And you swap so that each person has done all roles. It's absolutely fantastic. I love this. You have to be careful sort of organizing the classroom properly. If you've got a huge classroom, you might have to be inventive. It's a full body experience. Everyone is involved because it's physical. You know, it's like when you go for a walk and lots of ideas come to you. You've forgotten it's a language exercise. You've forgotten it's school because there's this physical aspect. How wonderful it is to move instead of just sit there and try and absorb stuff. The body is made to learn, to think, to act whilst moving, such as whilst running away from a saber-toothed tiger. You know, we think best when we're on the move in a serious situation. So there's an element of competition, a healthy element of competition. Because it's a game. They're trying to be the first people to complete the text. But it can't just be speed because it has to have accuracy as well. Because later on, when you analyze what they've written, you can look at accuracy and you can, okay, you finished first, but if you have more mistakes than the people next to you, maybe you didn't sort of win 100%. And they feel a massive achievement with that. Memory, concentration, teamwork, everything is in there. Love that activity. And that is the end of that activity. I'll just open it up again, and then I do have a little bit thing to finish off with, but just see if anyone has any questions on those. What do you think? Do you do that? Would it be chaos if you did a running dictation? Speak to me, somebody.
I never tried. Hi, my name is Cinzia, so I never spoke.
Hi.
But I did it once myself as a student. I participated to a TEFL course,
Yeah.
and so I did it myself. So I found it actually very funny. Maybe the school where I am right now, middle school, would be quite difficult, especially because they already yell and scream. So it's very difficult to have them, you know, relax and calm me. But I was thinking about the idea of creating a story. Can you just repeat it again? So you give a little piece of paper, then there was like the first line, and then they pass it.
Can I just say something on what you just said about your situation being difficult because they scream and shout already? I understand that. So what do? It's an activity where it could be chaos, but you could make it an activity where they have to whisper. They have to whisper. They mustn't make any sound except the whisper of the dictation to their teammates. That, you know, that could be one of the rules. Once they've got rules, they normally accept it. And if everyone is whispering, if one person speaks more loudly and everyone else is whispering, they will be got somebody speaking here. Yeah, so if you say the rule is you have to whisper and you have to walk and not run, otherwise it's chaos. So you have to walk, you can walk quickly, but you mustn't run, and you have to whisper. If one person speaks too loudly, they will be the one who is, you know, standing out, and students often don't like to stand out. For the story thing, yeah, you have a piece of paper. You have a piece of paper, and the first person writes the first sentence, and then they fold it over. Then the next, they pass it on. The next person writes, blah, 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 and then they fold it over. So you can't see what the other people wrote. Right?
So I thought actually that you only, like a clothes matching exercise, you wrote actually the first sentence with only two gaps to be filled. No, they create entirely the sentence.
No, to make it manageable, you give them the sentence with the gaps. So you say to them, you write this. Once upon a time, there was a gap called gap. They have to write that, but they put the name in. Once upon a time, there was a fish called Janet. Once upon a time, so they write the whole sentence, but they put their original words in the gaps.
Only the first sentence. And then the other 5 are entirely created.
No,
because they folded. So this is what I don't understand.
Yeah, but they fold it and they pass it to the person next to them.
And so they found actually the second sentence to be filled in.
No,
okay, I understood.
You give it to them. You give it to them.
I give it. Okay. Now I got it. Okay, thanks.
You give them the second sentence with gaps.
Sorry.
They fold it over, pass it on. You give them the third sentence with gaps. They add the gaps. So it's a dictation, but with inventiveness. Any other questions on that? Were there any activities you particularly liked, thought were crazy, are going to try in your lessons? Let's have one more person. One more person who has got a comment. Who's it going to be?
Oh, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I really want to share an experience. I tried banana dictation. Don't know if you know how it works.
Banana dictation.
Yeah, you dictate a short text and you substitute some words with the word banana.
Okay.
And the students have to guess what is the right word. It's very simple. And I tried running dictation, but the problem is not the behavior of the students. Sometimes is that you don't have enough room to let them move in the school. You have to use the corridors, and you know that the colleagues are not always very happy about it. Otherwise, I think that banana dictation is something funny, and you can stay in the classroom and they enjoy.
Yeah, it's fun, you know, it's silly. But it's silly, therefore it's fun. That means they do it as opposed to not do it. That means they're interested instead of bored, you know, even if it's silly, as long as it's not too silly. And yeah, absolutely. The problem with the space, of course. But, you know, it could be something like you could do the one where a student at the front of the class whispers a sentence to the person in the front row. They turn around and whisper it to the person behind them. They turn around and whisper it to the person behind them. Yeah. It gets to the back, and the back person is the person who writes it.
Yeah.
You know, so there are ways of getting around it. You have to be inventive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I don't want to take any more time because it went on a bit long, but I can finish my presentation. It's a couple more slides. It's not actually. Shall I finish my thing? I'll finish my thing. Okay. I'm just going to share my last thing here, and then it's bye-bye time. So my bonus creative idea, I can't even remember what I wrote. Yeah, this is something which I'm not really going to tell you about, but I'm going to tell you that it exists because Maria Antonietta has inspired me to get back into English teaching in a different way online. And I've created something called Linguarobics, and it follows the same principles as aerobics, but with English. So there's certain time periods, you have a specific exercise you have to do for that time period, then you have a break, then you do another exercise. It's going to cover all sorts of things. It's going to be really fun. So think about that. Linguarobics, it's coming your way, folks. And if you want to stay in touch to find out how that works, then my invitation to you is to become part of my creative universe. I have created in the past a lot of free stuff, and you know, I'd love to have your input on that, your feedback. So that's going to be on a website. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, so it's coming soon. I've got one called funenglishlessons.com. It doesn't work at the moment. I'm revamping it, and that's going to be full of free English stuff. So if you go there, you won't find it, but it should be live again soon. And then rainbowenglishschool.org. You can find that, but it's the old school for real humans, which I had in my town. I moved, I stopped it, and now I'm going to make it an online thing. And that's going to have interactive online lessons, weekly Zoom calls for all levels, eventually. So if you want to check that out as well, it could be another interesting resource for you. But, you know, first of all, I'd love for you to inspire me to get my Fun English lessons going again, because that was good. And if you are interested, then just send me an email to sab@rainbowenglishschool.org or sab@funenglishlessons.com. And I'll just give you the addresses, you know, the addresses like the Facebook pages and things like that that are relevant. Yeah, so that's basically it. sab@rainbowenglishschool.org. And finally, I will say that this has been 9 creative personalized language learning thingies with me. Thank you, TESOL Italy. And of course, Wish Hazel.
Thanks a lot, Sab, for your amazing and inspiring webinar. I'm sure my colleagues will become your Facebook followers and also contribute to the website and online teaching resources provider you're developing. And thank you to all the attendees of this webinar. See you soon for another exciting adventure into the kingdom of teaching English as a foreign language. Bye bye, friends.